The coronavirus pandemic has shined the spotlight on a lot of problems in the country. Among them, the chronic diseases and other underlying health issues that studies have shown put people at far greater risk of getting seriously sick or even dying from COVID-19. And while our excessive sugar intake and relative lack of exercising as a culture is partly to blame for that, so too is our use of many common personal care and household products. But a new study finds simply reading the labels and knowing what to watch out for in such things can go a long way towards protecting your health, which is more important now than ever, obviously, in the time of COVID. I'm joined now by one of the authors of that study, Dodson of the Silent Spring Institute in Newton. Robin, it's good to see you. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Great. So what are some of the things in shampoo, deodorant, and other consumer products that we should be worried about?
Yeah, so unfortunately, many of these products that we use every day contain what are called hormone disruptors, things that kind of scramble our hormone messaging system in our body. So things like parabens or BPA or triclosan are found in these products that we use every day.
And what's the effect of, even the names alone, I assume, is not good, but what's the effect? What are the health implications? Can we get sick from these things?
Right. So exposure to endocrine disruptors research has shown that exposure to endocrine disruptors can lead to a host of health effects. These include things like immune suppression, thyroid disease, obesity, asthma, and even cancer, unfortunately.
So, and obviously, I'll state the obvious, but I assume when I mentioned in the introduction to you that it's even more serious in the time of COVID-19, because I assume the presence of some of these chemicals in your system has potential or more to make you more vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19. Is that why it's more urgent right now?
Exactly. So there's some of these chemicals, for example, PFAS, which is a chemical or a group of chemicals that can actually suppress the immune response in our bodies. And research has shown that exposure to people with higher levels of PFAS in their body, vaccines are less effective for them. So it's very important at this time, to make sure that these co-exposures are not leading to diseases that could actually increase our risk or increase our susceptibility.
So wait a second, let me be clear. So it gets you at both ends. I didn't understand this. So it's not just that you're more vulnerable to the effects of the coronavirus, but you are less positively affected by a vaccine, potentially. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially, yes. It depends on the chemical. There's some chemicals, yes, that would suppress our immune system, affecting the outcome. But also they might set us up, unfortunately, for being more susceptible, right? If they're linked to things like asthma or diabetes or obesity, all of which are risk factors for worse COVID outcomes.
Silent Spring has been looking at this stuff for a long time. I actually submitted my own urine for a test for these things a year or so ago, and you learn a lot. What did you learn in this study that you didn't know before?
Right. So we knew that these chemicals are in the products that we use every day. We know that these chemicals are associated with a broad range of health effects. And we know people want solutions, want to figure out how they can limit their exposure. So what we wanted to do was simply just find out whether or not, if you read the product label, if you can limit your exposure to chemicals. And the good news is that generally, yes, people who read product ingredient labels generally had lower levels of these chemicals in their body.
I want to get back to that in a minute about taking personal responsibility and improving your health the way you talked about. But just so that people don't think you're talking about some obscure products on the margins that no one would ever use anyway, can you tell us what a couple of really common products are that virtually everybody has in their house that contain some of these chemicals?
Yeah, so hand soap, body lotions, cosmetics, cleaning products, even food containers where we might store our leftovers. All of these are everyday products.
And popular names, too. Again, we're not talking about the low budgets or the whatever, some of the high-profile brands, yes?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's get to your first part of the cure here, personal responsibility. Reading a label. Reading a label and looking for things you should avoid is only helpful, assuming there are products that allow you to avoid those things. Are there suitable alternatives that are affordable for people that don't have some of these chemicals in them?
Yes, we did find that people generally, if they were reading product labels, could do that. We weren't necessarily prescribing which particular products they were looking at. So generally, the population was able to do it on their own. And that is really great news. But that only gets us partway through to the solution, right? We need better transparency in what chemicals might be in the products.
You know, I loved your line in the press release. I think it was yours. If it wasn't, I love somebody's line who says you can't shop your way out of this problem. Is that your line? I think it was.
Exactly.
Oh, whatever. It was
Yeah.
a great line. It was your line. Okay. So, and obviously that means more transparency. You hope the pressure on these companies causes them to be more responsible to us. But also government regulation. I think it was just yesterday that Governor Newsom in California signed a bill banning 24 chemicals that are exactly the kinds of things you're talking about. You're nodding in agreement, so I guess I'm right, from common household things. That's exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
It's exactly what we should be doing, right? So not only should people know what's in their products, but let's get the worst offenders out of the products to begin with. And let's help companies invest and develop in safer chemicals for healthier products.
Have we done anything like that here in Massachusetts?
Unfortunately, no. We can, and I think it would be a great idea.
And I assume the federal level, same thing. Things must be pending, but no action, yes?
Exactly. There's been things introduced, but unfortunately that haven't been able to move.
And final thing is, if people want to get involved in this, I'm going to give them some information about Silent Spring. But in terms of these legislative fights, what do they need to be prepared for? I assume the argument against it is either, one, they're wrong, they're not unhealthy, or two, that making them more healthy would make them completely unaffordable. Is that essentially what the campaign on the other side projects?
Yeah, but what I want to remind people is that it's not like one of these chemicals is found in one of these products. People use multiple products every day that contain these chemicals, and these exposures add up. So even if they're found at lower levels in one product, our everyday lives, unfortunately, mean that we're exposed to a whole soup of these chemicals at levels that could definitely have a health impact. And so I think we need to kind of put that into perspective and question whether or not these chemicals should be in there in the first place.
Robin, thanks for sounding the warning. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more, Silent Spring has a virtual event coming up. That's on October 8th. My Boston Public Radio co-host, Marjorie Egan, and I happen to be hosting. And you can find more information online at silentspring.org.